Alright, so we've got a climb. Actually, it's got a nice little reference here for some of our V speeds, and we're looking for our X, which is 62 knots. That's your rotate speed. Or maybe, I'm sorry, R is your rotate speed, 55 knots. So we're going to accelerate once we get clearance here to take off, and once we get lined up, and we'll know to rotate at 55. So now that we're set here.
Tower Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha, ready for east departure at runway 23.
Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha altimeter 29.9, 2 winds 25 tree at 4. East departure approved. Cleared for takeoff runway 23.
Cleared for takeoff runway 23 Cessna Golf Sierra Alpha.
So it's, even though we've been given clearance, it's still incumbent on us to give a visual scan. We've got to check the traffic, make sure there's no traffic without radios, or make sure nobody's taking off or landing in this particular. So I don't see anybody visually, so we're clear to go ahead and approach. Normally you might have something like, and we could actually turn it on here, even though it's kind of a defunct feature on our map screen. Sorry, we use this option. So let's go to map while I try and do two things at once. And there's actually a traffic map that you can turn on using ADS-B that should show you any local traffic in the area. Again, it does not work, but we could simulate and say, hey, we're clear, we don't see anybody. All right, let's get lined up here, make sure our nose is straight. Switch this back real quick. And we know and real quick, before I take off, so I'm going to go ahead and set my heading bug to 2-3. That's just helpful for understanding which direction you're heading when you take off. And I'm also going to make note in our flight plan of which way we're turning first. We're going to turn to 059, which the GPS, the magenta line, will help us with. So we're all set to go. I'm going to give it full throttle. Feet on brakes, lifting brakes. Adding some rudder to keep us lined up. Watching our speed, should come alive. Fuel's in the green, RPMs are a little light because of our altitude. Well, maybe not the altitude, but we're full rich, so okay, we're ready to rotate. And lifting, 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 reach 70 knots, which I know is our target best rate of climb. Looks like we've exceeded that by a little bit. Continue to climb, continue to climb. I'm on 2-3, still holding at 230. Still holding 233. Okay, we're above flaps.
Cessna Golf Sierra Alpha, continue for east departure.
Taking flaps away. So now at this point we want to continue in the traffic pattern, whether it's left or right. I'm assuming this is a left pattern, although in these mountains you never really know. So, because we want to turn around, this is going to be a tough one. Just drop throttle just a little bit so we can kind of sharpen our turn. We're still climbing, turning, climbing. Back to full throttle. Got to acknowledge that clearance there.
Tower Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha, continue for east departure.
So now we're in kind of a downwind position, and we're also somewhat lined up for our first track here. So I'm going to use the GPS guidance loosely, where our plan is just to follow this valley in between the mountains and just follow it along. So as long as we don't deviate too terribly much, I think we're still going to be, I'm not going to worry about flying the needle too much. At this point it's just going to be, whoops, there was activating trim wheel. Alright, so what we can do is level off here somewhere around 1300. I'm just going to give us some buffer below our 1500. Once we level off, we should be gaining airspeed, which in these mountains I definitely would prefer to have some speed with us so we can use it to our advantage should we get into any trouble. Okay, so we've hit 1500, definitely time to level off so we don't exceed that by too much. And of course we can adjust that. If we decide it's too uncomfortable to fly at that altitude, maybe we should climb a little bit higher just to clear some of these valleys. Or maybe if we, you need to make that decision earlier rather than later, because it's going to be difficult to gain altitude in such a short distance. Alright, so we're flying the line here. We're still climbing a little bit too much. I'm going to actually just use kind of more of a visual reference of keeping us inside this valley here. So if we get above our desired altitude, that's no big deal. So we'll go ahead and just follow the river here. So we've got really good airspeed now. We're at 116 or so. As long as we're above maybe 110 knots, I think that's enough to kind of, again, we don't want to be at we don't want to be cruising at 80 knots. You don't have enough power to do anything at that point should you get in any trouble. So we'll go ahead and drop our throttle back a little bit here. We don't want to overspeed. We don't want to overtax the engine. We want to conserve some fuel. Looks like we've climbed quite a bit above our desired altitude as well, so we'll dip the nose a little bit and take away a little more throttle. Keep us at around between 110 and 115 knots. Drop down maybe below 2,000. Luckily it's a nice clear day. I don't think I would fly this if it was if our conditions were any worse than they are, or if this was at night. You definitely need to be able to see. Keep the visual reference points in mind. I'm going to go ahead and take away our flight plan, and we'll zoom out a little bit just to kind of get an idea of our total course here. So it's just a couple of turns as we again follow the valley. There's one questionable turn up here, which I'm not sure what that's going to look like. We'll try and make a gauge for how high we need to be at this point to clear this area, but it's going to lead us into, and I believe I can do it this way, yeah. So I can scroll over. Oh, okay. Let's use the tools while I'm making sure I keep us in the valley. So what's interesting is, and I'm not, okay, it doesn't show elevation for these, but it does show you your latitude and longitude as I move the cursor around. I was hoping that it would show us elevation. So what I'm assuming is we've got water here, which again should be close to ground level. We've got water here, which is close to ground level. The problem is there's some unknown terrain feature in between. So I'm hopeful that there's not much, or there's some sort of pass we can come through, but we've still got a ways before we make that determination. Worst case scenario, we climb. These don't look to be much more than a few thousand feet, these mountains. So keeping an eye on our altitude here, we're still at about 1,500. Airspeed is now dropped, so I'm going to go ahead and re-add throttle as we're leveling off here, just again to keep us between 110 and 115. And I might leave us, well, I'm going to go ahead and take the cursor away here just so it'll continue to follow our track. 1,500 feet, 109. So at this point we could request flight following from Vancouver Center, but it's probably just going to be overly chatty and it's not really going to do much for us. You definitely want to file a flight plan in a case like this, just to make sure you let people know where you are, when to expect you back. See some people down there. Alright, so we're going to make sure we get trimmed here for proper straight and level. And we might even need to start climbing just a little bit just to clear some of these trees. So we're going to have another turn here. Just going to generally follow the terrain, like I said. Climbing a little bit here, which is fine. Gives us a little bit of clearance over this valley. So we're at a little over 1,000 feet above our target altitude, but that's okay because I'd like to we're coming up on the turn down the next valley stretch. That's going to tell us visually what we need to do to clear, and I can already kind of see that I don't think there's much in the way of a cutout there. So as we look off to the right, to the south, we're going to go through this valley, and then at the end we're going to try and cut left, but I don't think there's any opening there. So I'm going to go ahead and keep climbing. I've got full power. I'm going to trim up here just a little bit and give us maybe, I don't know, less than 500 feet per minute climb, just so we don't slow down too much in the process, and we can just kind of gradually gain some altitude as we continue to fly. Now, as we get closer to 3,000 feet, we should be paying attention to our mixture. I'm looking at the engine RPM right now. We're still looking good. It's right around 2,700. It's dropping slightly as we're climbing, so I can actually start the process of leaning just to find that peak RPM, or just, return us back. That was just a slight pull of the mixture, and it brought us instantly right back to 2,700. But as we continue to climb, that should, both for engine reasons and for altitude, air density reasons, that should change, and we want to keep an eye on it. Alright, so 5,000 feet now, engine still performing well, 100 knots, fuel is good. Outside air temperature not quite at the point where we need pitot to be activated. Alright, so now we have a nice little cutout here. We could bail to if we need to, which actually might be our best option. So I'm going to go ahead and cheat a little bit and crane around here. Alright. So you can start to see some of the water features that are off to our left here. These are not ground level lakes. These are elevated lakes. This is good. This is about what our waypoint is. We've got 30 seconds till we reach it, so I'm just going to wait until GPS tells us to turn, and I'm going to go ahead and make this left turn into this valley. Looks like we should clear it. 5, 24, 23. Okay, so it's already indicating our turn. And let's go ahead and do that now. Start a nice safe turn here to the left. Make sure we don't hit this. We can actually drop throttle just a little bit. Nose up. Wow, we're already up to 5,700, so my original estimate of 1,500 feet was way off, but I was somewhat prepared for it, so. Alright, so it looks like the flight planning worked somewhat well, aside from the elevation guess. Now, come to think of it, I think the original plan did have us at around 6,000 feet, just to avoid some of this terrain. So pay attention to that when you do your flight planning through the world map. The game does a pretty good job of assigning an altitude that'll keep you free of obstructions, including terrain. So I can visually make out the lake in front of us. We've got a combination of here, and on the map you can see it's 12 miles away. Well, our waypoint is somewhere inside the lake, and it's lighting up here. Alright, so we're approaching our turn here. It's 352. I've got the heading bug set. Looks like the CDI is already changed. So let's make that turn. Nose up just a tad. Nice and smooth for the rest of the flight. So less than 8 minutes from now, we should be arriving and on the lookout for the airport. Alright, now we're lined up here and back to 352, so we'll stay on course and we'll lift the nose here, cut through the bottom of the cloud. We should be giving minimum about 500 feet below the cloud and at least 1,000 feet to either side of the cloud, but in this case it's a little bit wispy and we can see through it, so we're not too worried about other traffic being in there and scaring us, or vice versa. Looking for 352. So at this point, once we're steady, I could probably enable autopilot here, but we've got less than 4 minutes to our target. Now, we're definitely within radio range, so I should be tuning in and trying to communicate, listen for traffic. And we want CAJ4, which is Anaheim Lake. And it looks like it's just a common traffic advisory. So right now we're gonna have to assume winds are from 270, 240, something like that. So we'll land at 31, full stop, and we'll announce our position.
Charlie Alpha Juliet for traffic Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha 6 miles south, 5,700 feet inbound to land runway tree 1.
So also, just for correlation purposes, I can see there is a little bit of a ridge out here up front. Don't really know the distance of that per se, but let's call it 15 miles. And I can also see that there is an indication of that ridge here on our map, on our terrain map, and that's definitely clear of this airport. So we're only, like it said, and like it's showing us here, we're less than 5 miles out. And we can also start to look for some features that might help us identify where this airport is. One of them being this body of water, which starts about here, and you know the airport is just before that. So we should start seeing it here, and I might be just a little bit too low. This looks like an interesting feature here. I don't think that's it. So I'm gonna just go ahead and climb a little bit. Yeah, so we've dipped down below 6,000. So I'm gonna try and bring us up to 6,000 just to give us some eyeballs on this. Now, one of the things you can do here is to make some slight movements to the left and to the right, just to open up our visibility of the ground below us, looking for traffic, looking for obstructions, and helping to try and find our target. So again, I'm looking out here, don't see anything yet. We're less than 3 miles out. I'm actually going to make quite a bank here to the right so that we can roll back left. And it looks like I see it here. Alright, so if we're going to be landing on this direction, then technically we're going to go ahead and cross the airfield just to confirm visually that that's it. It has us at 1.8 miles away. So as you cross this airfield, again, you want to be looking out for things, looking out, checking the runway to make sure it's free of obstructions, and so we'll cross it hopefully in a manner that can give us some visual. Looks like the runway's in decent shape. I don't see a windsock at this elevation, but go ahead and drop throttle. This is going to be our upwind turn. And we can visually say that we're roughly pattern altitude. So I'm dropping throttle, upwind, do another look to the left. Looks clear. We'll call out our downwind once we get there. I'm not hearing any other traffic on the station, but again, you should be visually checking and scanning. Alright, so we've passed the numbers here, so we can make our crosswind turn. Try and remain here at just about 5,000 feet, which we've dipped below. We're in flaps territory. Alright, so I'm going to set my heading bug here just for that, I believe it was 3.2, 3.1, so I can have that as a reference. I'm going to put it just off our left or right, depending on how you look at it. And we'll start a downwind here, trimming up, and add flaps. Retrim in a second.
Charlie Alpha Juliet for traffic Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha is on downwind runway tree 1.
Pretty lonely. Alright, so our airspeed has dropped quite a bit. Got flaps added. Altitude 4,500. Looks like we're between 500 and 600 feet above the surface, so we're going to again try and add some airspeed and climb just a little bit. Make sure we have a reasonable glide slope. Alright, so I put the runway, the bug behind us to know that we're kind of tracking parallel. Climbing just a little bit, we can do our downwind checks here. So a couple of things to check for would be our gas is looking good. We don't need to switch tanks. Undercarriage is fixed. Do our brake check, make sure there's nothing happening there. Got our lights on. I'll turn, yeah, we still have all those on. And temperature, pressures, we'll check those in a second here, just so I'm going to deviate a little bit. Alright, so we can re-lean a little bit, just to give us some, or enrichen our mixture, I should say. And our pressures are looking good. Alright, Airspeed's definitely dropping. Looks like we passed the numbers on 3 and 1, so we're ready for our base turn.
Charlie Alpha Juliet for traffic Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha is on base runway tree 1.
Turning to base. Should be a short base. I'll be ready to call final. Not going to have a lot of room to work with, but yeah, we don't have any room to work with.
Charlie Alpha Juliet for traffic Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha is on final runway tree 1 to land.
For 310. Airspeed's looking good. Looks like there's a displaced threshold to clear these trees, so I'm aiming for the numbers. I'm going to get lined up, dropping throttle because we're gaining airspeed. I could start slipping if we really felt like we were fast, but
500.
okay, glide slope's a little extreme. I'm going to lighten that up. Throttle's way back now. Continuing to line up, looking for the numbers, adding some flaps. Nose down, trim down. Airspeed's looking good, still not quite lined up, but I think I'm going to clear the trees just barely. Shit. Alright, cutting throttle. And back to center. Flare. Realign. Center, center, flare, 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 center. Kiss the ground. Line up, and we're home. Alright, so I'm not braking yet, just letting the rollout continue. I'll go ahead and take the flaps away. Adding some brakes. Alright. We'll taxi away, clear the runway, and let them know. Once our tail fully passes the line, we can call it. Looks like a busy airport for being way out here.
Charlie Alpha Juliet for traffic Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha is clear of the runway.
Alright, stand by while we do a quick shutdown procedure here. So we're stopped, parking brake, and I'm going to idle cutoff on the mixture, and I'll turn our ignition off, and then we'll turn our avionics off, and that should do it.